In this short video, I want to introduce you to a number of Excel functions that can calculate means, variance, standard deviation for a variable. And also the very useful Excel tool called pivot table that can produce descriptive statistics on a variable grouped and organized by other variables. Let's now take a look at this data set. In real working environment, it's not uncommon that you will need to work on data sets with only partial information or no information at all on the definition of each variable. For this particular data set, by looking at the title of each variable, you can guess it's about the performance of a number of investment funds. First thing you might be tempted to see is to figure out how many funds are there by scrolling down. It's a good practice to lock the header row so that you will not lose sight of the definition of each variable when you scroll down. So you can do so by go to View, click on Freeze Panes, and click on Freeze Top Row. Now when you scroll down, the top row is going to stay put. If I were to guess the meaning of all the variables, I am probably most confident about the meaning of this column, the 1 year return. So I will calculate a number of descriptive statistics on this variable first. So what I'm going to do now is I want to expand this frozen area by select the first 10 row, right click and say Insert. So by doing so, I am creating a larger frozen area on the top so I can put all my calculation in, and then they will not move around as I scroll down. This is just my personal preference, but I find it really helpful, especially when you are working with a large data set that might have thousands of rows. So this is the list of statistics that I want to calculate. So if you are new to Excel, you always need to remember you always need to start with an equal sign to use any kind of Excel function. So in this case, I'm going to use the function count, and here it says what it does. The function counts the number of cells in the range that contain numbers. So I just need to apply that function on to this column, and then it should tell me how many cells in this column contain numbers, and that should take on the meaning of how many funds there are in this Excel sheet. So my personal favorite way of select the right range is the following. You first click on the top row of the range, and then you scroll down all the way to the bottom, and then you press down the Shift key and you click on the last row. So this is a very convenient way to select a range that is also applicable for selecting more than one column or one row. Now you just need to hit the Enter key, and so this tells you that there are 207 rows in this Excel sheet. Sorry, I mean 407 rows. And since we are dealing with number of rows, it does not make sense to have 2 decimal places here. So I'm gonna right click and click on Format Cells and change the decimal places into 0. So for the rest of these statistics, it's just about using the right functions. So in this case, I'm going to use average for the sample mean. And since I already know the range, I can simply reference them explicitly here. It's going to be I12 to I418. In this case, I would use function variance. And notice in this case, you have two variance functions. One is for sample, one is for population. Remember, the distinction between the two is when you treat a data as a sample, the denominator is n-1. If you treat the data set as a population, then the denominator is simply just n. Again, I12 to I418. For the sake of time, I just completed the rest of the list. If you do not know what function to use, you can always Google them. Now, from finance, you remember that the variance of return is an indication of the risk. And then now I also noticed there's a column called risk in this data set. So now I'm curious whether this column risk carries the same meaning. Namely, if I group all these funds based on this risk column, notice you have three different values: average, low, and high. So if I group the funds according to this average, low, high values, would each subgroup have different variance on the return? And also, would the variance agree with the labeling of average, low, high according to this column of risk? I will first show you how to do this the slow way, and then I will show you how to do the same thing the fast way using pivot table. So my goal here is I want to sort the funds into the right order of low risk, average risk, and high risk. So you first do it by selecting the right range for sorting. So this is, I'm going to select the top left cell of the right range, and then I will press down Shift key, and then I will click on the bottom right cell of the range that I want to choose. So now this is the range that I'm going to sort the data. Then you click on data, and then you say sort. Now I want to sort all these rows by this column, risk. Therefore, I'm going to choose risk. Now, also I want to sort it in the order of low, average, high, which unfortunately is not the alphabetic order that the A to Z will do. Therefore, we need to customize a new order by list low, average, and high. And then I will add these order into this custom lists, and I will click OK. Now all these funds now are sorted according to this risk column in the low, average, and high. So what we need to do now is to realize that I am dividing the original data set into three parts: the low part, the average part, and also the high part. So what I could do now is I can apply the same functions and select the according range and recalculate all these statistics. So that would be the slow way. It's slow because you will need to repeat the same computation as many times as there are different values in this column of risk. And here is where pivot table becomes very handy. It requires only a few drag and drops to produce the exact same result that you want. Now let me quickly show you how to do that. You click on Insert, click on Pivot Table. The range has been correctly selected, and I do want to produce the result in a new worksheet. Therefore, just click on OK. I will first compute the same statistics again for the whole data set with pivot table. So what I need to do is drag this variable in this value quadrant. And now I need to click on it and go to value field setting, and I will change it to count. Now it shows the correct counts, which is the total number of funds for the whole data set. Now I need to do the same thing by dragging the same variable into the same quadrant again, and this time I would click on it and I will choose average to calculate the mean. Similarly, I need to do this one more time, and this time I'm going to click on this button, click on the same setting, and change it to sample variance. Lastly, I want to calculate the sample standard deviation. So by these few clicks accomplish the exact same thing that we have done earlier. Now I am interested to see the same statistics but organized by the variable risk. So all I need to do is to drag risk and put it in this rows quadrant. And here you have it. The pivot tables just computes all these four statistics separated by the column risk in the low, average, high values. And similarly, we could change the format of pivot table to fine-tune its appearance. In this case, I want to have only 2 decimal places. Now you can go back to the raw data, and then you will see pivot table produce the exact same result as the result we produced earlier manually. Now, if you are interested to understand meanings of other variable, for example, in this case, the type, we notice we have 2 types. One is growth, one is value. So if we apply both variables, type and risk, we're going to, instead of divide the data set into 3 parts, we're going to divide them into 6 parts because of the combination of different values of these 2 variables. Again, this will be readily accomplished by pivot table by simply drag another variable into this rows quadrants. Now again, you will have 6 partition of the original data sets, and for each partition the same 4 statistics have been calculated. Now I want to verify whether the risk level of low, average, high does correspond to the increased level of variance. So I will now only keep the variance in the value quadrant. And I will drag type into this columns quadrant. Notice the difference between how the table is organized now versus before. Before, the 6 partitions of data is organized as 6 rows. Now the 6 partitions of data are organized into this 3 by 2 tables. So this represents the partitions of the data that has low as the risk level and has growth as the type. Similarly, the same definition for the other 5 partitions. And then, so it is the case that the risk level is corresponding really nicely with the increased level of variance within each partition of funds.